"Hi, worthless meatbag. Your junker Starship is an insult just being here." Varys spat at Chris, towering over the human to intimidate him. He jabbed a long blue finger into Chris's chest. "When I humiliate you in this race, your entire species will know their inferiority." Chris gritted his teeth but held his tongue for now. There would be time to answer the snide remarks, after he'd proven Varys and the rest of the galaxy wrong. At 28, Chris was Earth's youngest and brightest hope to finally earn respect in the intergalactic Starship race. He'd poured his blood, sweat and tears into modifying an old X-47 into a true competitor, the Phoenix, over the last 3 years. Upgraded engines, life support, navigation, cutting-edge human tech in every system. But to the advanced alien ships gliding into the Prilorian space station hangar, it still looked like a pieced-together wreck. Chris couldn't back down, though. Humanity needed this victory. As a new spacefaring species, they were seen as primitive, backwards, mocked, disrespected. But not for much longer if he had anything to say about it. The Phoenix would burn a path to the finish line, lighting the way forward for all humankind. He just prayed his skills and ship were up to the task. The stakes couldn't be higher. It was fly or fail for Earth now. Chris wiped the sweat from his brow as he tinkered with the Phoenix's life support system. The hangar was quiet at this late hour, with most of the other contestants already retired for the night. He preferred it this way, able to focus on his work without distractions or prying eyes. Suddenly, an alarm blared from the console. Chris jumped back as sparks flew from the wiring he'd just been adjusting. What the hell? He quickly shut off the alarm and assessed the damage. The life support was fluctuating wildly, oxygen levels dropping fast. If he'd been in space... Sabotage. It had to be. Chris gritted his teeth, anger rising in his chest. He'd expected the other racers to play dirty, but this was attempted murder. The next day, Chris carefully installed hidden cameras around the Phoenix. He had to catch the culprit in the act. Night after night he reviewed the footage until... there. A shadowy figure crept onto his ship, fiddling with the wiring. Chris zoomed in on the image. Zortex, that damned bug. He confronted the Xanthian in the hangar. "I know what you did to my ship. You nearly killed me." Zortex clicked his mandibles, compound eyes shifting nervously. "It was just business, human. Varys promised a cut of the winnings to take you out of the race. You're in over your head." "Varys, I should have known." Chris stormed off to report the incident to the officials, Zortex's confession still ringing in his ears. But the bureaucrat stonewalled him at every turn. "These are serious allegations," the head official said, glancing at a stone-faced Varys, "but without concrete proof." "I have the footage," Zortex admitted. The official cut him off. "Circumstantial at best. Unless you can provide irrefutable evidence, we cannot take action against other contestants based on your word alone." Chris left the meeting fuming, but refused to let this setback stop him. He'd show them on the racetrack where it really mattered. As the day of the race approached, Chris put the final touches on his secret weapon. The experimental propulsion system was a marvel of human engineering combined with scraps of alien tech he'd bartered for on the black market. Risky, yes, but it might just give the Phoenix the edge it needed. The night before the race, Chris was heading to his quarters, mind buzzing with pre-race jitters, when Varys and his lackeys cornered him. "You've caused me enough trouble, Earthling," Varys growled. "Withdraw now, last chance." Chris squared his shoulders and looked the blue alien dead in the eye. "You want me out of this race? You'll have to beat me fair and square, though I doubt you're capable of that." Varys raised a fist, but the whine of Prilorian security drones made him pause. "This isn't over, human. Tomorrow you die." He stalked off, shoving Chris as he passed. Chris let out a shaky breath. He should be nervous facing death threats before the biggest race of his life, but as he looked up at the stars, resolve hardened in his gut. He would win this race, for himself, for the Phoenix, for humanity, no matter what it took. Chris's heart raced as he guided the Phoenix into position at the starting line. The sleek ships of his alien competitors gleamed under the bright hangar lights. A newcomer caught his eye. a matte black vessel with an unknown pilot obscured by a dark hood. Chris filed that mystery away as he focused on the task at hand. The signal blared, and the ships lunged forward as one. Chris gunned the thrusters, weaving and rolling to jockey for position in the early fray. The first major obstacle rapidly approached, a dense asteroid field. The nimble Phoenix zipped into the chaotic mess of space rock. Chris reacted on instinct, pitching and yawing smoothly around asteroids. His piloting skills shone as he expertly navigated the treacherous field. Emerging from the asteroids, Chris found himself vying for the lead alongside Varys and the enigmatic dark ship. They barreled through the course, locked in a dead heat. Nebulas swirled in Chris's viewscreen as they hurtled onward. The most harrowing leg of the race loomed ahead, a supermassive black hole's accretion disk. Ships would have to thread the needle, balancing dangerously close to the event horizon. Crushing gravity and searing radiation pummeled the racers as they skirted the roiling maelstrom of energy and debris circling the black hole. The extreme conditions proved too much for several ships, which peeled off in defeat. Chris and his two rivals shot out the far side of the accretion disk, neck and neck once more. The Phoenix groaned, pushed to its absolute limits. It was now or never. Chris activated his secret weapon, the experimental propulsion system. The ship jolted forward with a massive burst of acceleration, blasting past Varys and the dark ship. But the Phoenix was never meant to take this level of strain. Alarms shrieked as the vessel shuddered violently, structural integrity failing. Bulkheads buckled around Chris as he fought to maintain control, realizing with dread that his risky gambit could spell his doom. Through skill and sheer force of will, Chris brought the rattling, shaking ship back from the brink of annihilation. The Phoenix held together, but the lead Chris had sacrificed so much to seize had all but evaporated. Varys and his other shadowy opponent were right on his tail as the final stretch came into view. The Prilorian made his move, ramming the Phoenix in a savage bid to snatch victory from Chris. The ships grappled and spun, locked together. Chris wrestled with the controls, the stars wheeling crazily outside the cockpit. Teeth gritted in desperation, he finally broke free of Varys's assault. But it was too late. The black ship rocketed across the finish line uncontested. In the wake of the race, the mysterious victor unmasked himself as Zortex, the same insectoid saboteur Chris had caught tampering with his ship before. The wily Xanthian had played Varys and Chris against each other, eliminating his competition through guile and deception. Chris was battered but unbroken. He had revealed the depths of human determination and ingenuity for all the galaxy to see, and when he arrived home to a hero's welcome, it was clear his valiant effort had won Earth new respect on the intergalactic stage. Chris wiped the grease from his hands as he stared at the message on his datapad, brow furrowed. The Prilorian High Council wanted to meet with him. He read the message again, just to be sure his eyes weren't playing tricks. They were impressed with the Phoenix's performance in the race, impressed with his experimental propulsion system, and now they wanted to collaborate to develop new technologies together. Part of him was immediately suspicious. The Prilorians had caused him nothing but trouble, what with Varys's constant insults and sabotage attempts. Could he really trust them? But another part, the part that always dreamed of pushing the boundaries of what was possible, leapt at the chance to work with their advanced technology. The door to his workshop slid open, and a tall, regal-looking Prilorian strode in, flanked by a retinue of engineers and scientists. "Mr. Chris, I presume." The Prilorian extended a long-fingered hand. "I am Zahn, lead scientist for the Prilorian Expeditionary Force. It's an honor to meet you in person." Chris shook the proffered hand cautiously. "The honor is mine. I have to admit I was surprised by your government's offer." Zahn nodded, his dark eyes serious. "I understand your hesitation, given your recent experiences with some of our less enlightened citizens. I want to assure you those responsible for the sabotage attempts will be brought to justice. We do not condone such actions." Chris crossed his arms, considering. He thought of the breakthroughs that could come from combining human ingenuity with Prilorian tech. the advances that could be made, the boundaries that could be pushed. Finally, he nodded. All right, let's do this. Let's collaborate. And so the work began. Chris and his team moved into a state-of-the-art Prilorian laboratory, working side by side with some of the brightest minds in the galaxy. At first, the Prilorians were skeptical of the human engineers' more unorthodox methods, but as they saw the results, the increases in efficiency, the novel solutions to long-standing problems, their respect grew. Chris found himself spending long hours in the lab, poring over schematics and simulations with Zhaan. The Prilorian was brilliant, and the two quickly developed a rapport, bouncing ideas off each other and challenging one another to think in new ways. But not everyone was happy with this new partnership. As Chris and Zhaan walked to the lab one morning, they were met by a crowd of angry protesters, led by a fiery Prilorian named Zalor. "Traitors!" Zalor shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Zhaan. "You sully our great civilization by sharing our secrets with these primitives." Chris bristled at the insult, but Zhaan held up a calming hand. He addressed the crowd, his voice steady. "Our collaboration with the humans will bring prosperity to both our peoples. We must embrace change, not fear it." But Zalor was not appeased. As the days went on, the protests grew larger, more vitriolic. Chris and Zhaan found themselves needing security escorts to get to and from the lab. Late one night, as they worked on a particularly tricky bit of code, the lab doors burst open. A group of armed Prilorians rushed in, led by a snarling Zalor. "You will pay for your betrayal." He leveled his weapon at Zhaan. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Zhaan pushed Chris to the floor, shielding him with his body as Zalor fired. Chris heard Zhaan grunt in pain, saw blue blood blossom on his lab coat. Rage and adrenaline surged through Chris's veins. He leapt to his feet, tackling Zalor and wresting the gun from his grip. The other attackers, seeing their leader fall, scattered. "Zhaan!" Chris knelt beside his friend, hands shaking as he tried to staunch the flow of blood. "Just hold on, I'll get help. You'll be okay." But even as the medics rushed Zhaan away, Chris could see how grave the wound was, and he knew with cold certainty that the attack was his fault. His collaboration with the Prilorians had painted a target on Zhaan's back. In the aftermath, as Zalor and his followers were rounded up by security forces, Chris sat numbly in the hospital waiting room, head in his hands. Was it all worth it? The advances they'd made, the progress they'd achieved, did it justify the price Zhaan had paid? The Prilorian government was quick to reaffirm their commitment to the project in the wake of the attack. They pledged increased security, unwavering support, but Chris barely heard their assurances. All he could think of was Zhaan, lying pale and still in the hospital bed. Then a small hand touched his shoulder. Chris looked up to see Zhaan's daughter, eyes wet with tears. "My father believed in what you were doing," she said softly. "He believed in you. He would want you to keep going." And in that moment, Chris knew what he had to do. He would honor Zhaan's sacrifice. He would take the partnership to new heights, achieve the breakthroughs they'd dreamed of, not for glory, but for friendship, for trust, for the betterment of all. Weeks turned into months. The lab hummed with renewed energy, human and Prilorian scientists working together in seamless harmony. And the fruits of their labors began to take shape in the form of a revolutionary new starship, one that combined the best of both species' technology and ingenuity. The day of the unveiling was one of celebration, of vindication. As Chris and his Prilorian counterparts pulled back the sheet to reveal the sleek lines of the Unity, the crowd erupted into cheers. It was more than a ship, more than a technological marvel. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when different peoples, different cultures, worked together. And as Chris met the shining eyes of his team, humans and Prilorians alike, he felt a swell of pride. They had weathered storms, overcome hatred, and forged something beautiful, something lasting. They had shown the galaxy what unity truly meant. Chris glanced to the side of the stage, where Zhaan sat in a place of honor, still recovering but beaming with pride. Their eyes met, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. This was only the beginning. The Unity gleamed under the bright lights of the launch bay, a testament to the tireless efforts of Chris, Zarn, and their team. Dignitaries from Earth and Priloria filled the observation deck, murmuring in excitement. Chris tugged at the collar of his dress uniform. He still wasn't used to the pomp and circumstance. Zarn nudged him. "Relax, my friend. This is a moment to savor." Chris nodded, a smile tugging at his lips as he surveyed the sleek lines of the ship. Their ship. The scars from Zarn's brush with death had faded, but the memory of that dark day still haunted Chris. They had come so far since then. The Prilorian Prime Minister stepped up to the podium. "Today we celebrate not just a technological marvel, but a bond between our peoples." His words were cut off by a commotion at the back of the room. The crowd parted, revealing a disheveled, desperate-looking Prilorian. Chris's eyes widened. "Varys," he breathed. The disgraced pilot stumbled forward, ignoring the security guards reaching for their weapons. "Please, you must listen," Varys rasped. "The traditionalists, Zalo, they're not working alone." Zarn held up a hand, staying the guards. "Explain yourself." "The Cranox," Varys said, his voice shaking. "A hostile species bent on dominating us all. They've been manipulating Zalor, using him to undermine your partnership." A chill ran down Chris's spine. If Varys was telling the truth... "How do you know this?" Chris demanded. Varys met his gaze, eyes haunted. "Because they tried to recruit me after the race. I refused, went into hiding. But I couldn't stand by, not anymore." He straightened, a flicker of his old fire returning. "I want to help. I want to make things right." Chris looked to Zarn, saw the same realization in his eyes. This changed everything. The Prime Minister cleared his throat. "It seems our maiden voyage must wait. Captain Chris, gather your crew. If this threat is real, the Unity must uncover the truth." Chris nodded, already moving. "Zarn, Varys, with me. We have a conspiracy to unravel." The Unity slipped out of the launch bay, a shadow against the stars. Chris sat in the captain's chair, Zarn at his right hand, Varys hunched over the sensor array. The bridge hummed with tension. They started at the traditionalist stronghold, sifting through abandoned computers, searching for a trail. Fragments emerged, coded transmissions, deleted files, whispers of a planet on the fringes of known space. "The Cranox homeworld," Varys said grimly. "It has to be." As they raced toward the coordinates, Chris pored over every scrap of data they'd gathered, trying to piece together the Cranox plan. A chilling picture emerged. "They've infiltrated both our governments," Chris said, dread settling in his gut. "Sleeper agents waiting for a signal. And look at this, a fleet amassing just beyond sensor range." Zarn's fists clenched. "An invasion force. They're going to attack, wipe out our defenses before we even know what's happening." "Not if we stop them first," Chris said, steel in his voice. They sent warnings racing back to Earth and Priloria, praying they would be believed. Then the Unity plunged into Cranox space, one ship against an armada. Laser fire streaked past the view screen as they wove between enemy vessels, searching for a weakness, an opening. The Cranox ships were strong, but slow to turn. Chris saw their chance. "There." He pointed to a flickering shield juncture on the lead dreadnought. "Varys, lock torpedoes. Zarn, get ready to punch a hole in their defenses." The crew moved as one, a perfect dance of human instinct and Prilorian precision. Torpedoes blazed through space, Zarn's deft manipulation of the Unity systems guiding them true. The dreadnought's shield flickered, faltered. "Fire at will." The Unity unleashed a barrage tearing into the exposed hull. The Cranox ship listed, belching flames. But even as it fell away, 3 more moved to take its place, cannons bristling. "We can't take another hit like that," Zarn warned, his face grim. Chris's mind raced, desperate for a solution. Then Varys spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I have an idea. If I take a shuttle, get in close, I can plant charges on their shield generators. Blow them wide open. Chris shook his head. No, it's too risky. We'll find another way. But Varys was already moving, a small smile on his face. This is my chance, Chris, to make amends, to be the Prylorian I should have been all along. Before Chris could argue, Varys was gone, the shuttle speeding towards the Cranox fleet. Chris watched, helpless, as the tiny craft wove through a hail of fire, disappearing into the dreadnought's hangar bay. For a moment all was still. Then a brilliant flash lit up the Cranox ship, then another and another. Explosions blossomed along its hull as its shields winked out of existence. "All weapons fire!" Chris roared. The Unity unleashed hell, tearing into the defenseless ship. It crumpled like tin foil, secondary explosions ripping it apart from within. But there was no sign of Varys's shuttle. The battle raged on, the Unity ripping through the disarrayed Cranox fleet. One by one the enemy ships fell, until only the Unity remained, battered but unbowed. In the aftermath, Chris and Zaan stood on the bridge, staring out at the wreckage. The Cranox threat was ended, the conspiracy unraveled. Earth and Pryloria were safe, their partnership stronger than ever, but the cost had been high. "He did it," Zaan said softly. "Varys, he saved us all." Chris nodded, a lump in his throat. He found his redemption, in the end. They stood in silence, mourning the friend they had lost and celebrating the future he had given them. The Unity had lived up to her name. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.